Welcome to Dead Set Anime. Hello folks, Dead Set here, and welcome to Dead Set Anime. Today I'm going to be reviewing Darling in the Franxx. Now I'm going to start out by saying this. This is anime, and anime can be very provocative. It is not made for everyone. Anime can be mature, it can be fun, it can be everything that any audience could want. However, as much as I like the proliferation of anime, it also invited a very bad element of virtue signalers into the anime crowd. And this is what I think about it. I am completely anti-censorship. In my world, everything's on the table to be discussed. Everybody is on the table to be insulted. You can have fighting words. You can do all that stuff. All of that is part of human expression. That being the case, I have absolutely no tolerance for virtue signalers. So just be aware of that. This is anime. I like it the way it is. In fact, I liked it better back in the 90s where there was less censorship. But we got what we have right now, and I don't want any more of that expression taken away behind a bunch of idiots who seek to control everyone because they can't handle what they're seeing. If you don't like it, just go somewhere else. End rant. The first thing that we have to discuss in any anime is the opening music. The opening songs mean as much to production as anime itself. This anime has a decent banger called Kiss of Death by Mika Nakashima, or Mika Nakashima, however you pronounce it. I usually judge how good the opening music is by my desire to skip it after a few episodes of hearing it. I must say that while the opening of the song did fit the mood and appeal of the anime, it was not good enough to stop me from skipping it by episode 4 or 5. For anime such as Mob Psycho 100, there was no skipping the opening music because it was just that good. Darling in the Franxx will have a style of art that is definitely familiar to those who've watched productions made by Studio Trigger. There are inflections of Kill la Kill to be found in the robot designs, and the character designs, while standard fare, were not cheapened by some of the shortcuts that you find in many works of anime that are trying to cut corners, such as doing this thing that I really abhor is like showing a character's profile with a moving mouth on the side of their faces. I call this the hole in the face effect, or cheap. The character designs for Darling in the Franxx are simple, yet they work well with the narrative. The animation in this series was a joy to watch. The artist did not spare any talent when it came to not only animating the action sequences, but also the more evocative character scenes. I could turn the sound off and read the emotions on the characters, even some of the more complex emotions such as desire, jealousy, or consternation. The simplicity of the character designs is definitely made up for with the highly expressive animation. I would even say that if a more detailed approach to character design was used, it would have probably been overkill. The characters were very expressive without the over-the-top style that we would find in something like a Kill la Kill. And where Darling in the Franxx was over the top is where it needed to be, and as such, it balanced those styles well. This is a bold anime by Western standards. There are ecchi elements, but I found them to be a necessary part of the visual storytelling, as we find less of those scenes as the story begins to wind itself up to its conclusion. The earlier episodes are suggestive and very much on the nose when it comes to many of the themes, but as the story goes along, you begin to realize what is at stake and why I think that those things were necessary. There was the typical censorship to be found in an anime such as this, and of course it is to avoid being labeled a hentai. Nevertheless, if you want uncensored graphics, then I suggest you read the manga. It cuts no corners. Darling in the Franxx is a mecha anime that was the creation of two studios, A1 Pictures out of Japan and Studio Trigger, which is also out of Japan. Some of the more popular anime produced by A1 include Sword Art Online, Fairy Tail, Magi, The Kingdom of Magic, Euromanga Sensei, and one of my all-time favorites, Grimgar Ashes and Illusions, or Hai Togensu no Grimgaru. And the more popular anime by Trigger includes, of course, one of my all-time favorites of Cyberpunk Edge Runners, Kill la Kill, which is, everybody knows Kill la Kill, BNA Brand New Animal, which was great, and of course Little Witch Academia, and many more. And so we have two studios with considerable catalogs joining to make this anime work. The premise of this anime is that humans have to survive a war against an underground race of biomechs called Klaxosaurs. In the backstory, mankind discovers this new form of energy called magma energy and harnesses it to power their exotic technologies as well as achieve immortality. However, in doing so, they strip the earth of nutrients and awaken the Klaxosaurs that seem to be made of the very energy that mankind is mining. And war ensues between mankind and the Klaxosaurs. I'm greatly diminishing the plot for now because while survival remains the goal of the characters, the true enemy changes as the story goes on, so it's not cut and dry. The main theme of this anime is the concept of the Jian, which symbolizes a happily married couple. The Jian is a mythical Chinese bird with one eye and one wing, and in order to survive it must join its counterpart, which is the opposite sex, to form a male and female pair, thus symbolizing the bond between husband and wife. With two wings, the bird can now take flight and thereby survive. There are two main characters in this anime, and they are Hiro and 02. The supporting characters are Ichigo, Futoshi, Ikuno, Goro, Mitsuru, Miku, Zorome, and Kokoro. 5 males and 5 females. Each male and female must form a pair in order to start and pilot a giant biomech called a Franxx. They are part of Squad 13, which acts in defense of Plantation 13, which is a large mobile city. The mecha pilots, or the children who pilot these mechs, are referred to as parasites. In this world, procreation is forbidden and adults are immortal. Children are not taught about sex, and rarely do they make it into adulthood. At a young age, they are injected with yellow cells, which is necessary for them to form physical and emotional links between the boys and girls and the Franxx mechas. The sole purpose of these parasites is to fight Klaxosaurs. The adults, however, live in sort of a dreaming VR state. There's a machine that stimulates their brain's reward system constantly, and so they always feel happy, although their bodies are basically kept inside of some type of stasis, and these adults rarely wake up from their sleep. So they basically live in a virtual dream, as their bodies are forever kept alive through the use of magma energy. There's a strong element of slavery and deception here, as in the anime I am reminded of War is a Racket by General Smedley Darlington Butler. As I was watching this anime, I was trying to analyze the age of the children here. I would estimate that they were in their early to mid-teens. It is at this time when young people are most sexually efficacious that the demands of older adults are pressed upon them to sacrifice themselves in violence before the young people have had a chance to love or even mate with each other. We see this in war when young males who are barely even able to shave, and most of whom have never even touched a woman, are thrown into the horrors of war, many of whom never return, and more than a few returned in such a mangled state of mind and body that their youth is spent. This anime scoffs at the notion of fighting for ideals of adult leaders who only use children for the benefit of their survival, instead of adults sacrificing themselves for the preservation and well-being of their own children. And I found this hardline position that the anime took when it came to this subject very endearing.
My wings exist for you.
We start with Hiro coming across 02 as she's bathing in a pond. 02 emerges from the water naked and with a fish in her mouth. Hiro is of course awkward in his response to 02's nudity. However, refreshingly, 02 is indifferent about her nude status. It is clear that 02 is more mature than Hiro, but there's still also an untamed aspect about her. She is a wild child with horns and fangs to boot. I like the opening meeting of these two main characters in this anime. Hiro, his name meaning abundant and generous, as well as wide or spacious or even sky. When related to the tale of the Gion bird, it makes sense. 02 is a free spirit or a wild child, and she definitely represents a demon. However, the fish in her mouth and the fact that she is bathing on the pond does scream both baptism with water and a savior, which is the symbol of the fish. It announces that these two would save each other and the world. They both described how they were alone and connected in their loneliness. This opening scene defines not just the relationship that had come, but also what is to come of their squad mates as this anime progresses. I also like the name given to the pilots. The girls are called pistils and the boys are called stamens. The imagery that fills my mind is the blossoming or flowering of youth. This makes what the fathers are doing in this anime so much more despicable as well. But we'll get to that later. Like many heroic journeys, this one starts in failure. Hiro fails to link with a girl named Naomi and failed to start and pilot one of the Franxx for graduation. Soon after this event, 01 is in combat against a Klaxosaur and nearly fails to kill it due to her partner dying while riding with her. Hiro joins 02 and their union is consummated with a kiss, and together they properly pilot 02's Franxx, which is named Strelitzia. Visually, they cross the threshold into a Franxx with great fanfare.
After all, you are now my darling.
However, we are still at the departure stage of their journey. The world has not yet been flipped on its head and everything is still status quo. Hiro continues to be chastised by his squad mates for his inability to start a Franxx, even though he successfully piloted Strelitzia with 02. The problem is that he doesn't remember anything but the kiss before the fight. Furthermore, Ichigo tries to prevent Hiro from riding 02 as well. It is clear that she has feelings for Hiro and that she sees 02 as competition. Hiro, however, continues to see 02 around the dormitory as 02 inserts herself into his life, much to the chagrin of his squad mates. Ichigo even goes so far to allow Hiro to ride with her just to prove that he can pilot. It works only for a moment and then the Franxx shuts down. Interestingly enough, 02 seems certain that it would end in failure. Later, Mitsuru tries to block Hiro and 02 by inserting himself between the two of them. Now, this is one of the places where the manga and the anime diverge. In the manga, Hiro does not allow Mitsuru to ride 02. However, in the anime, Hiro tells 02 to allow Mitsuru to ride with her, and he does so successfully at first. During the battle, 02 overtaxes Mitsuru and he ends up unconscious. So, in the anime, Hiro crosses the threshold into initiation later, whereas in the manga, this is where he steps off the edge and onto the path. As for 02, she is ahead of Hiro in that she is challenging allies and weeding out suitors so that she can be with Hiro. And it's shortly after these events in the anime that Hiro crosses the threshold and only under the threat of 02 being taken away. His step into the unknown comes with a confession and a proposal. This is the union of Hiro and 02.
You're the first person to tell me something so embarrassing.
It's my first two.
We learn that pairings doesn't always work and that there are reasons why. Mitsuru and Ikuno's pairing doesn't work because of their low pairing compatibility, which is why Mitsuru rides 02. The reason for their failure will become known later in the anime. Pistil and stamen linking is very intimate. The children are sharing each other's thoughts when they link, and when I think about how absurd the positions are as they are piloting the Franxx, it becomes less absurd in the context of intercourse. The positions of the male and the female while piloting the Franxx does represent a deep intimacy between pistil and stamen. It's the kiss or exchange of information from mind to mind, and given some of the verbiage in both the anime and the manga, the sensation is ecstatic. This positioning is also a visual representation of their gender roles. When I think back to the graduation scenes with the kids standing next to their partners and with their pinkies joined by a single ring, I'm reminded of a marriage ceremony, and there is a sense of permanence to their couplings. When the children are linking in the Franxx, it seems to be akin to consummation of their union.
Don't make weird noises!
It's a natural reaction!
From the time that Hiro and 02 finally link up and it is affirmed that they will be partners in Strelitzia, they are tested time and time again. It is during this phase of the anime series that many of the revelations take place about the world of these children. We learn why Ikuno has unstable links with stamens. We watch the children go through their growing pains. We see betrayal and a kind of divorce between Futoshi and Kokoro, and all of the pain that it leaves in its wake. More importantly, the anime asks the question, what does it mean to be human?
You're heartless. You aren't human! Human? Human, you say? Let me ask you something then. What is human to you people? Tell me that.
In episode 10, when Zorome meets one of the city adults, we learn how absolutely miserable and desolate the city is. The immortality of the adults isn't all that it's cracked up to be. They are essentially prisoners of life. The existence of the adults is inhuman. And yet, this is what the children are being tasked to defend. Looking at the coming-of-age challenges that the children face and juxtaposing it to Hiro and 02 as well as the world around them, the anime answers the questions with many examples leading up to the grand finale. Overlay the myth of the Gion over the human part of this and it becomes very clear. Ikuno has an unstable link with stamens because she loves Ichiko. Her homosexual tendencies make it harder for her to link with boys. Therefore, she is a bird with one wing that is not attracted to a male counterpart. And flight requires a functional relationship with the opposite sex.
Franxx can only be operated by a boy and a girl. And I've always wished that stupid system would just go to hell forever.
Ikuno.
Another example is with Squad 9, who doesn't consider themselves to be humans. In fact, they think themselves more evolved and without gender. In the case of 9 Alpha, he is actually in the position of a pistil when it comes to piloting a Franxx, while his partner, who is female, controls him. Later, after Squad 9 is wiped out, they discover that there is more power in the traditional role that is exemplified by Hiro and 02. During the final conflicts, we find that 9 Alpha has reversed his role and we find him sitting in the position of a stamen and manning the controls of his female partner. However, there's one problem with this. That part only happens in the manga. It is at this point near the end of the anime where all of the narrative consistency goes out of the window. For 21 episodes of this anime, the viewer witnesses the struggles of these children as they reassert their stolen legacies of what it means to be a human, male and female, and to reforge the connections that humans have with the earth and trudge through all of the growing pains that came with the journey. Their issues are consecrated with the myth of the John bird, with one wing and who needs the opposite to fly, thus completing itself. We have referenced the solid binary philosophies in dealing with anima and animus, yin and yang, positive and negative, male and female, parent and child. Yet, after 21 episodes of solid narrative, the anime shoehorns events that completely contradicts the moral and philosophical narrative of the story by having Hiro pilot a Franxx with 9 Alpha in a male-on-male joining. This pissed me off not because of the homosexual nature of it. It pissed me off because of the narrative inconsistency. During the first 21 episodes of this anime, the philosophical narratives that guided these events were: first was the joining of Hiro and 02 as saviors of humanity with the fish and the bathing. Second was the marriage of the children during the graduation ceremony. Third was the pairing instability that Ikuno had with the boys. Ikuno had problems connecting with Mitsuru due to her love and attraction for Ichigo.
What's wrong, Chlorofitum?
Seems Ikuno's not up to it.
I'm almost there, just give me a second!
Don't bother, it's over.
Fourth were the words of 9 Alpha himself in the reasons why they still had sexual organs, and that they only needed them to power the Franxx.
Gender is a pain, an annoyance only tolerated for the sake of operating the Franxx. And that's all it is.
Fifth was 02's assertions that the dimorphic pairings were more powerful than the non-binary pairings of Squad 9.
That's what you think. But they are much stronger than all of you are. Their eyes are on the future.
Sixth was the reintroduction of pregnancy and childbirth into the human population by Mitsuru and Kokoro.
Look it, there's your papa.
Seventh, and most importantly and divine, was the tale of the Jean bird, which encapsulates the entire premise of this anime. It even goes so far as to show that if a pistol tries to pilot a Franxx alone, it can only do so in stampede mode, meaning that it was out of control, which could be like a bird trying to fly with one wing. If the piloting of the Franxx by the two boys, Hiro and 9 Alpha, was not bad enough, the anime further adds insult to injury by having 02 have an out-of-body experience where her mind joins with the Franxx and leaves her body behind on Earth. And when the Franxx takes damage, so too does her body, which is 1,000,000 miles away. This too was in direct contradiction to the answered question that this anime posed, which is, what does it mean to be human? Up to episode 21, the anime answered by showing that to be human is to be a human being with a human body existing in a dimorphic state. It further infers that the mind is an inseparable part of the human body and that memory isn't simply stored in the mind, but is a process that involves the entire human body. Because of these completely unnecessary narrative inconsistencies, I will only reference the manga for the rest of this review. Later, after Squad 9 is wiped out, they discover that there is more power in the traditional role that is exemplified by Hiro and 02. During the final conflicts, we find that 9 Alpha has reversed his role and we find him sitting in the position of a stamen and manning the controls of his female partner. When I think about this, the sexually suggestive positions that pistols and stamens have when piloting a Franxx are more meaningful and far less gratuitous. When it comes to human memory, the anime toys with the idea of memory not just being part of the mind, but also part of the body, and the body has its own way of storing memory. Like the Jian myth, the mind and the body must work in sync. When the memory wipes are executed, the lost memories seem to reassert themselves with trauma or emotional pain. At one point, Hiro dies temporarily, and this sends 02 into a stampede mode, which is the wildness that we saw her exhibiting at the beginning of the series. It is here where we learn of the wildness and what is eating at her and why she considers herself inhuman but kills Klaxosaurs in her attempt to become more human. I think of deleted memory in this example like an amputated limb. The limb is gone, but the ghost pain remains. This is opposite the existence of the adults who have basically abandoned their bodies for a VR sensational experience in a stasis capsule. The children have lived physical experiences and full lives that include the pains of growth, love, loss, envy, anger, uncertainty, victory, rediscovery, and a free range of emotions that a person would feel in relationship to the events in their lives. We also tragically learn about how sterile the children's upbringing was in the way that they were not given names but code numbers. We get a glimpse of how 02 was tortured when she was young and how the kids had to fight off bullies and how they made promises to each other that were broken because of the memory wipes by the adults. We basically began to see how special Hiro was to all of the children and how the memory wipes ruined those relationships. It was Hiro who first named himself, and when all of the other children learned of what he had done, they all came to him for names. There is something very Adamic about all of this. It reminds me of Adam in the Garden of Eden when all of the animals came to be named. The children were also born in the place called the garden. No irony in symbology there. Last but not least is the concept of death and rebirth in reference to what does it mean to be human. If a human is immortal, are they really human? The cycles of death and birth are as human as a body having 2 arms and 2 legs. Striving for immortality is as inhuman as forbidding sexual reproduction, and yet we find the adults doing both of these things. This is part of the grand finale with the death of the adults in the plantations, which is described as their release from the prisons of their bodies. When these concepts have finally come to fruition, the children finally defy the adults and stop fighting for the adults. They begin instead to fight for each other. Furthermore, the children begin to carve out a future for themselves, absent the world of the adults. Ironically, the world that the children begin to build is based on the world of their ancestors, those who had children, who tilled the ground, who labored with their bodies, and worked. This is the return stage of the hero's journey, the resurrection, and the elixir is and has always been their young human bodies. It is what they depend on for life, labor, and children. In summary, again, we look at the question of what does it mean to be human? To reiterate, to be human is to exist like the Geon bird in a dimorphic state. The myth of the Geon bird is the ultimate example of this type of dimorphism that defines human existence, and anything that is in contravention of that, be it transsexualism, immortality, or existence outside of a corporeal body, ends in the destruction of the human being and inevitably civilization itself. Interestingly enough, when I thought about Hiro and 02, at the conclusion, a song popped into my head, and its lyrics are very appropriate to these 2 characters. I'll read the lyrics and some of you will know the name of the song. I will not say the name of the song, but I will put the name of the artist and the song in the information box below. And the lyrics are as follows. She was meant to be wild. He was nearly a child, but they only could feel each other. They were paper and fire, angel and liar, the devil of one another. But they were thrown to the ground with a terrible sound, just like somebody broke a heart. These lyrics truly speak to me when it comes to these 2 characters, and ironically enough, the name of the group who made this song translates into God. Let that sink in. Well, this concludes my review of Darling in the Franxx. Anyway, stay tuned for more anime reviews in the future, and see you next time.